It was just another ordinary day for 14-year-old Mia, navigating her way through the busy streets, her white cane tapping with each step. But today, the world around her was about to change in ways she never expected. A group of local gang members, seeing Mia alone, decided to intimidate her, taunting her and threatening her safety. They didn't know she was different, that her mother wasn't just any single mom. She was a former Navy veteran, trained in skills far beyond what they could imagine. When Mia's mom, Sarah, hears what happened, a calm but dangerous resolve builds inside her. She's not the woman they think they can push around. As Sarah steps into the confrontation, the gang members are unaware that they're about to face a force far stronger than they ever imagined. What happens next? Stay tuned. Sarah hadn't always been the quiet, reserved mom people saw today. Years ago, she was a different person, a proud Navy officer who had seen and survived some of the toughest situations imaginable. After leaving the military, she thought she had left that life behind, settling into a peaceful routine with Mia, her only child. But being a single mother to a blind daughter wasn't always easy, and Sarah knew she couldn't shield Mia from everything. The neighborhood, once quiet and safe, had changed over time. Gangs had moved in, bringing with them violence and fear. Sarah knew her daughter had to navigate alone sometimes, but she never thought the day would come when Mia would be a target. Now, as Sarah stood at the edge of the alley, watching the gang members mock her daughter, an unsettling calm washed over her. The skills she thought she'd buried deep inside were stirring again, waiting for the right moment to resurface. Would that moment come soon? Sarah watched from the shadows, her heart racing, as the gang members continued to circle Mia. She could hear the cruel taunts, see the way they leaned in close to intimidate her daughter. Mia, always so brave, stood her ground, but Sarah could see the fear flickering in her eyes. Mia was used to challenges, but this felt different. These men weren't just bullies. They were predators, feeding off the vulnerability they believed Mia had because of her blindness. Sarah's fingers clenched into fists. She hadn't trained for nothing. The Navy had taught her to read the subtle shifts in body language, to predict what someone would do before they even thought to move. And she knew that if she didn't step in now, the situation would spiral into something far worse. But she also understood the danger of revealing her past, of exposing the lethal skills she had honed over years of combat. In the distance, one of the gang members, Trey, a lanky figure with tattoos covering his arms, caught sight of something. His eyes narrowed, scanning the area around them. Sarah tensed. Was he already sensing that something wasn't right? The last thing she wanted was to make herself a target too soon, but Mia was her priority. Meanwhile, Mia stood her ground, her fingers grazing the strap of her backpack. She could feel the weight of their eyes, the way their presence seemed to press against her chest. She had no idea who these men were or what they wanted, but she could sense their hostility. A chill crept over her, not because she feared them, but because something in her gut told her things weren't as simple as they seemed. Trey spoke, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "What's the blind girl gonna do? Call for help. Ain't nobody gonna hear you." Mia bit back a retort, her mind racing. She had a trick or two up her sleeve. She wasn't just helpless. But as the seconds ticked by, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than a random encounter. There was something about their aggression that felt personal, like they knew more about her than they should. Suddenly, there was a shift. The smallest of sounds, just the faintest crunch of gravel underfoot, caught Mia's attention. Her instincts flared. Someone's close asterisk. Before she could react, Sarah stepped from the shadows, her presence unmistakable. Trey turned, his eyes locking onto her with a smirk, but the moment he met Sarah's gaze, something shifted in him. For a brief second, the arrogance wavered. Sarah's voice was calm but sharp. "Leave her alone." Mia's heart skipped. Mom. The gang members froze. Sarah's words hung in the air, but they didn't carry the weight of fear. They carried the weight of someone who had seen the worst of humanity and survived. The tension between the two sides thickened, and Sarah could almost feel the storm building. Would they back off, or would the situation escalate into something far worse? For a long moment, no one moved. The silence stretched out, thick and heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Trey's gaze flicked to his crew, and for the first time, Sarah could see doubt in his eyes. The other gang members shifted uneasily. "Who the hell are you?" Trey asked, his voice low and sharp, though there was an edge of uncertainty. Sarah didn't flinch. "I'm the one who's going to make you regret this." Her words were simple, but the tone, the confidence in her voice, was enough to make the men hesitate. Sarah had a way of speaking that made it clear she wasn't bluffing. She wasn't just some worried mother. She was someone who had survived chaos and danger, someone who had seen the worst the world could offer. Mia stood frozen, barely able to breathe. Her mother's presence was powerful, but there was something else, something primal in the air. She could hear the tension in the way the men spoke to each other now, the change in their rhythm. Something was about to happen. Her instincts were screaming at her, but she couldn't see it. She only had one choice now: trust that her mom knew what to do. Trey took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. "You don't know who you're messing with, lady. We run this block." "I don't care who you think you run," Sarah responded, her voice colder now. "You're not going to hurt my daughter." Trey's lip curled into a snarl, and for the first time, Sarah saw the real malice in his eyes. This wasn't about intimidation anymore. This was about control, his control. He wanted to break her, to prove a point. Suddenly, one of the other gang members, an older man with a scar across his cheek, moved to flank Sarah from behind, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. He thought he had her. But Sarah was already moving, faster than they could react. She pivoted with the fluidity of someone who had spent years in combat, her instincts kicking in as she faced the new threat. The older man barely had time to register what was happening before Sarah was on him. She didn't need to see his eyes to know exactly where he was. Her hands were a blur, precise and deadly, taking him off balance in seconds. The gang members shouted, confusion spreading through them. "Get her," Trey ordered, but there was hesitation now. Sarah's movements were a dance of control and strength. She wasn't just defending her daughter, she was fighting to protect everything she had built. The gang members began to close in, but Sarah was faster, her military training kicking in with a cold precision that left them scrambling. Mia's heart pounded in her chest, the sound of fighting filling her ears. She could hear her mother's steady breaths, the quick shuffle of feet, the thud of bodies hitting the ground. It was chaos, but her mom was the calm in the storm. Trey's face twisted with rage as he lunged forward, pulling a knife from his jacket. Sarah saw the movement just in time, her body reacting before her brain could even process the danger. She sidestepped, using her elbow to knock Trey off balance. But the knife didn't fall far from his hand. Now it was only a matter of time before someone made a fatal mistake. Would it be Trey? Or would it be Sarah, pushing too hard, too fast? As the blade glinted under the streetlights, everything felt like it was hanging by a thread. Mia didn't know what was coming next, but she could feel it. The moment of truth was closing in fast. The knife glinted in the dim light, its edge catching the reflection of Sarah's steely gaze. She could feel the danger pulsing in the air, the balance between life and death shifting with every breath. The gang members were closing in now, their movements erratic, but something about their actions felt off. Just as Trey lunged again, Sarah's instincts screamed at her. She blocked the strike effortlessly, but it wasn't the blade that caught her attention. The streetlights flickered, and in the brief darkness, Sarah heard a sound, a car engine revving, tires screeching. A flash of headlights cut through the alley like a warning shot, and before she could react, a figure emerged from the shadows, a silhouette too familiar to be anything but trouble. It was Marcus. Mia couldn't see him, but she felt his presence like a shadow over her heart. Marcus, the leader of a rival gang, the one who had made Sarah's life a living hell back in her military days. He had disappeared for months, but his name had always loomed like a specter over the neighborhood, a constant reminder of danger. Thought you could run from your past, huh? Marcus's voice was calm, too calm, as he stepped into view. His eyes locked on Sarah with a knowing smile, and for the first time Sarah hesitated. This wasn't just a random encounter with local thugs. It was a trap, a game. And Mia? She was the bait. Trey's gang froze at the sight of Marcus, fear creeping into their expressions. The shift in power was instant. Marcus wasn't just another thug. He was the one who pulled the strings, the one who controlled everything in the area. His reputation alone was enough to make men like Trey back off. Sarah's jaw clenched. Her past with Marcus had always been complicated. There were things